Alright, the final figures are in. It's a 7-year high for MLB attendance in 2024. Baseball is not dead. Total attendance was 71,348,366, up from 70,718,450 in 2023. Average attendance 29,374 per game, an increase of 259 fans per game over last year. 15 out of the 30 major league teams saw an increase over last season. As you can tell, that's a very small increase, not like last year when attendance surged from the year before. This was a tiny gain in attendance, but like I said at the end of last season, a small gain, no gain, or even a small drop in attendance would be seen as a victory for Major League Baseball, as long as it didn't revert to the lows seen in 2022 and stayed closer to the 6-year high seen in 2023. Well, as impressive as the 2023 figures were, they managed to top them in 2024. Just barely, but it did go up, reaching a 7-year high this season, meaning that it wasn't just a 1-year fluke, it's an upward trend that hopefully continues throughout the 2020s. Will it continue though? Well, there are reasons to be optimistic and reasons to be a little worried going into next year. Mostly positive though. I'll go over all that, but first let's look at the team-by-team attendance figures for 2024. Dodgers led the way again, as they have every year since 2013. 48,657 average attendance, an increase of 1,286 per game over last year. We'd really like to see them get up over 50,000. That has not happened since the Yankees averaged 53,000 per game in 2008, their last season at the old Yankee Stadium. 4 teams averaged over 40,000, same as last year. Last year it was Dodgers, Yankees, Padres, Cardinals. This year it's Dodgers, Phillies, Padres, Yanks. 3 out of the 4 the same. Phillies got better, Cards had another rough season. Fans of both teams responded. Phillies saw a big gain at 3,841 per game. Padres a small gain at 728, and the Yankees hardly a gain at 504. Number 5, Atlanta Braves, 37,182, down 2,219 per game. Chicago Cubs, 35,923, up 1,662 per game. St. Louis Cardinals, biggest drop in attendance in all of Major League Baseball. They lost 4,481 per game. Attendance per game was 35,532. Still good, but not St. Louis good. Houston Astros just over 35,000 per game, down 2,680 per game from a year ago. Rough start to the season had a lot to do with that. Finished on top in the end, but couldn't make up for it at the gate. Toronto Blue Jays, big loss. Each game saw a decrease of 4,206. Final average attendance was 33,102. Red Sox couldn't quite make the postseason, couldn't quite match last year's attendance. 32,839 per game. That was a loss of just 150 per game. Texas Rangers couldn't defend their World Series title, but the thrill of being defending champions all summer was enough to bring more fans out to the park. 32,735 per game, an increase of 1,463 per game. San Francisco Giants, despite a losing season, saw more fans come out to see them play. 32,688, up 1,822 per game from last year. Angels lost Ohtani last offseason. Trout went out with a season-ending injury. Last place finish in the AL West. So many reasons not to go out and watch this team. They finished the year down 778 per game, but still ended with almost 32,000 a game. Seattle Mariners 31,500, down 1,662 from last year. Colorado Rockies, a lot like the Angels, another awful season, last place finish, lost almost 1,000 fans per game, but still averaged over 30,000. Milwaukee Brewers 31,300, down 175 from a year ago. That's the last team here over 30,000. 16 out of 30 topped that mark, down 1 from last year. One big difference between now and 15 years ago is that back then less than half the teams were over 30,000, yet average attendance for the whole league was higher. So it's the teams at the bottom now that are really dragging down the overall attendance. The team with the biggest gain in attendance was the Arizona Diamondbacks. Their attendance increased 4,700 per game. Average attendance for the year was 28,912. New York Mets, this team saw the biggest drop in attendance early in the year. 2 months in and they were down more than 6,000 per game. Low expectations going into the season, and a rough start to the season. Mets fans were too pessimistic. Everything turned out alright. The team was competitive. Final average attendance was 28,757 per game, down 3,016 per game from 2023. A big loss, but much better attendance in the second half. Baltimore Orioles, a team that has built an annually successful team, and the fans are rewarding them with much higher turnout. Over 28,000 per game, up 4,251 from a year ago. Another good season in 2025, and we'll see them get over 30. Cleveland Guardians, great season, and it showed in the attendance. 25,703, up 3,139 per game from last year. Cincinnati Reds, just short of last year's numbers, down 174 per game, and just 10 fans per game short of 25,000. Washington Nationals, 24,288 per game, an increase of 1,253 per game from last year. Minnesota Twins, all summer long, look like they might be a postseason team, look like they might be on the plus side in attendance, but neither one came true. Average attendance 24,094, down just 278 per game from last year. Detroit Tigers, average attendance 22,942, up 3,030 per game from a year ago. Probably a lot more would have shown up if they'd known the team was going to have that great finish. Pittsburgh Pirates 21,239, up 1,108 per game from a year ago. Kansas City Royals, a great summer in KC, got back to the postseason and saw one of the biggest leaps in attendance, up 4,337 per game, getting them just over the 20,000 mark. That leaves 4 teams that were under 20,000 in average attendance, a little improved from last year when there were 5 teams under that mark. Chicago White Sox, no surprise, saw a big drop, down 3,567 per game, averaging 17,046 for the season. But when you consider just how bad this team was, the attendance figures really aren't so bad. And some familiar names at the bottom. Tampa Bay Rays, 16,500 per game, down 1,266. Miami Marlins usually don't draw well anyway. This year was especially bad as they were the second worst team in the National League. 13,000 per game, down 930 from the season before. And the Oakland A's, worst attendance in MLB, 11,386 per game. Extremely low, but actually an increase of 1,110 per game. We all know why attendance has been so bad there the last few years. This year it ticked up a bit with local fans coming out to say goodbye to their team. So attendance for MLB went up in 2024. Half the teams sold more tickets than they did a year ago. Only 4 teams were under 20,000 per game. 2 of them were the Florida teams, which we're used to seeing. The other 2 ball clubs had really good excuses for not showing up to the games. So overall, it's good news. More people watching from home too. According to MLB, ratings for nationally televised games were up this year, and there were higher streaming numbers on MLB TV. Now just waiting to see if the postseason can match that. Last year, postseason ratings were alright, but the World Series set a record for lowest ratings ever. So despite the 6-year high in attendance in 2023, the awful World Series ratings at the end gave more fuel to the baseball is dying argument. If the postseason ratings hold steady and the World Series can hit a 5-year high, ratings for the last 4 World Series were all terrible, then the 2024 season will be considered a success in every possible way. But what about next year? Anything that will cause a big rise or fall in attendance? Not really, I'd say it should be about the same. One benefit they will not have next year is there won't be any team like the Diamondbacks. That is, a team that plays in a big market but doesn't draw well, makes it to the World Series, and suddenly a lot more people start showing up. Of course, whatever teams make it to the World Series will most likely see more seats filled next season. That almost always happens, but not such a dramatic increase like we saw in Arizona this year. As for the D-backs themselves, a little drop-off will be expected. Most of their attendance surge came in the first half of the season. It died out toward the end, even though the team was in postseason contention all the way till the final day of the season. They ended up not making it to the postseason, so they won't have all that excitement to build off of, like they had going into 2024, when they were defending National League champions. But the team will be happy as long as 2025 attendance is closer to the 2024 figures than the 2023 figures. On the positive side, I don't think any fan base will be as unnecessarily negative as the Mets were at the start of this year. The Mets will have a lot to look forward to after making the postseason this year. Attendance will rise next year from the very start of the season. It all depends on what happens this offseason, of course, but right now it looks like the only teams that'll be really negative going into the season are teams that either already have low attendance or teams that draw well no matter how hopeless the outlook seems. The White Sox are down as low as they'll ever go. Attendance is never really high there anyway, and they've got enough loyal fans to make sure they never finish with the lowest attendance, even when the team is historically bad. For the Marlins, next season might seem a bit hopeless, but the Marlins don't draw good crowds even when the team's doing alright. So this is actually a good situation. Since someone's got to finish last, might as well be the team no one's going to watch anyway. Then you have the Rockies and Angels, two teams that attract big crowds no matter how bad things get. Might see a little drop, as both teams saw this year, but not much. Any drop in attendance from those teams will be offset by a continued increase from teams like the Royals and Orioles, two teams that saw increases this year and will have even more to look forward to heading into next season. And I expect a big rise in attendance from the Tigers, a team that's been down for a while now, but had an amazing turnaround to end the 2024 season. They'll carry that enthusiasm into next spring. Then you have the Athletics. If they fill the stands and the grass in Sacramento daily, they can increase the team's attendance by as much as 2,600 per game. A decent increase, but limited by Sutter Health Park's capacity. But also, I can't say what the attitude toward the A's will be in Sacramento. I think they'll be selling out every game, but can't say for sure. So when all is said and done, after all these things cancel each other out, I'd expect attendance to be about the same in 2025, maybe a small increase like we saw this year. So it's all looking pretty positive right now. Nothing that'll cause a dramatic increase like we saw in 2023, but at the same time, no sign that it'll revert to the constant declines we saw from 2008 to 2022. Looking further into the future, the big year will be 2028. That will be the year the new Tampa Bay Rays Stadium opens. Attendance is sure to rise when that happens. Maybe not as much as they want to, but there will be some kind of increase. The new ballpark will be 30,000 seats. They'd like to fill the seats for every game in 2028, like most other teams do with the opening of a new stadium. But I'd say 25,000 is a more reasonable expectation. They'll still have the issues of the team playing away from the city, where most of the people live, and the traffic going into St. Petersburg. But there will be some kind of improvement with the building of the new bridge and the development of the area around the stadium. Besides, if I'm right and it's only 25,000 per game, that would still be 8,500 more per game than what they saw this year. That would be a huge increase. That's also the year when the A's are supposed to have their new ballpark in Vegas ready. If that does happen, the A's would likely double the attendance seen the year before in Sacramento. That, combined with the Rays' attendance surge, could make 2028 the year that MLB really gets close to its 2007 attendance record. But the deal in Vegas is in limbo at the moment. Not sure if it's going to be ready by 2028, or if it's going to happen at all. We'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, that's where we stand for attendance at the end of the 2024 season. That's all for this one, and until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya!